Please give a warm welcome to our panel, Catherine Kehoe, who's Chief Customer Officer at Nationwide, Kelly Williams, Managing Director of Commercial at ITV, Laura Fenton, Chief Executive of OMG UK, and Stephen Woodford, Chief Executive of the Advertising Association. Welcome to you all.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dan. A great overview of the forthcoming report, AdPace 2025, an incredible shift and transformation in our industry. Our second panel of the morning, we had some real political heavyweights on stage in terms of journalism. We've now got some real marketing communications heavyweights. So I think we've got to sort of meet the challenge that they've set as journalists in terms of the insight that we're going to bring to this. And clearly, one of the big narratives coming out from that, from both Chris Bryant and from the journalist panel, is this elusive thing about growth. You know, we all know we need more growth. And what I want to get this out of this next section is a sense of how growth is, in effect, dominating or driving the conversations that you're having in your respective businesses. So we've got a brilliant lineup of speakers here to unpack that. And so when we think about growth in your businesses, and it's really about I want to get a sense of the conversations that you're having in your businesses about growth, how you get growth in your business and how your businesses support growth. So let's start there with that question. I think we'll go round the arc here. So Catherine, let's start with you on that.
Yeah, so a lot has changed, and obviously we've been talking about what has changed since the beginning of the century. And the marketing industry is just fascinating because a lot has changed and a lot hasn't changed to support growth, right? The fundamentals of marketing is about growth, right? But to support it, on one level, nothing has changed. So, you know, we've got creative is still the most important determinant for advertising performance. Its brands are still the cornerstone of the way customers choose what they're going to purchase, what they're going to buy, and what they're going to interact with. Whether that's Coca-Cola, Microsoft, McDonald's, these are still the highest growing, the most valuable brands globally on earth. And broadcast AV is still one of the key drivers of growth in terms of the most effective way for us to reach and drive preference with consumers. And measurement and effectiveness is still dependent on research and statistical models like it has been for the last 25 years. That said, everything has changed. You know, Apple is the most valuable brand on earth now, and we've seen the way that people are interacting. Smartphone adoption has created new opportunities for growth, and it's the primary way that consumers now interact with brands. You've got Amazon, Google, Samsung are the top 10 brands, whereas Nokia and IBM are simply not. We've seen media and its ability to help us as brands grow has experienced such extraordinary fragmentation over recent years, which is such a challenge for all of us. You've got 76% of consumers now watching subscription VOD, which is obviously a real problem. AI can write copy, marketing departments are having to be the heaviest users of data and tech, because to find, to reach, and to penetrate customer to grow, we need to be able to use tech and data. And you'll find that tech and data in marketing departments are the highest users in organizations, in many organizations now. And there's an arms race now for data scientists and analytical talent in the industry. So this requirement in order for brands to grow, that we have to spin both plates, which is creative and technology, to create impact and to find and reach and appeal in totally different ways than we have in the last 25 years. And my final thought would be that what is really interesting, one of the biggest changes of recent years that I think is the way that now that consumers can interact directly with brands and indirectly. So directly through social media or indirectly with the data trail that they leave in terms of what they like, what they dislike, what they've interacted with and what they've done. And organisationally, across paid, owned and owned channels, this is creating a real opportunity for us to think very differently about how we are growing our brands, because we need to think about advertising less of a one-way and more now as a two-way dynamic, and it's a very different operating environment.
Thank you very much. I've got 4 plates spinning in there.
Good. Let's keep adding them.
4 plates of the direct and indirect, and then the creative, and then the tech and data.
Yep.
And I think, actually, when it comes to agencies, Laura, I mean, I think the job of agencies is just fearsomely complex now in terms of orchestrating, working with their clients to orchestrate all those challenges. So you're sort of spinning a lot of those plates, particularly in the media space. So talk about how growth is driving those conversations in your organisation.
I think, to Catherine's point, there's some things that have changed extraordinarily, deeply quickly. And then there's some things that haven't. And I think we always have said that we grow as a business when our clients grow. So I think the things for me that are critical really in this space is that we continue to really invest in those data scientists, those analysts, and they are incredibly highly sought after skills actually in our agencies, in our industry, to ensure really that we can quantify the impact that advertising has on business growth, on commercial outcomes. And I think we do a good job of that. I think we could do a better job of that. And I think it is getting more complex to make sure that those analysts and the models actually can really capture what is this increasingly fragmented, complex landscape. And I think that's really important, because if we do it right, it means that we can go into our clients' boards and make sure that, from CFO down, CEO, CFO down, everyone is really understanding the value that advertising is bringing to the table, to that business, to that brand, which is critically important for the reputation of what we do. But also that then we can bring it back in the agency. That data can really power the way that we plan, the way that we make sure that we're continually optimizing the return that media advertising can drive for a business or brand. But it does require investment, and it requires a lot of very kind of technical skill set to get that right. But when I was listening to Dan talking earlier and to Chris Bryant, I think we also need to do a better job of advertising, the power of advertising, and talking about the growth that it can drive. The IPA Effectiveness Awards is probably the best possible example of where we do that. But, you think there must be so many more amazing case studies like that we can kind of create and merchandise for our industry. And then I guess the final thing for me when I was thinking about this question is, I think it's also critical that as agencies, and we do this more and more, that we are remunerated based on growth, and we're remunerated based on the commercial outcomes that we are driving for our clients, so that we have skin in the game and we have that shared success. And I think that really makes us all, we need to, all be grown-ups around the same table, shooting for the same goal, and then making sure we talk about it kind of loudly and proudly outside of our advertising category. I think is key to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Kelly, so thinking about ITV and the growth conversations you're having with ITV, both, I suppose, as a business, but also your contribution to your advertisers' growth. How's that showing up?
I'll come at it from a commercial perspective. We as a commercial team, I guess, not dissimilar to Dora, we spend all of our time trying to work out how we can help our customers grow their business, whether that's using, our mass reach proposition, whether it's our, addressable, data-driven proposition that's now really scaled, or whether it's using our creative solutions, integrating brands, in and around our shows, or creating content for brands. But I think the key certainly for our business over the last few years has been investing in building on Laura's point. It's been investing in commercial outcomes, proving it. Television, I don't think, has been very good over the years at proving outcomes for clients. We focused on outputs, reach and frequency, whereas I think outcomes is the most important thing, profit, sales, margin. And we've invested a lot recently, and we're collaborating as a TV industry on these points. But as the industry gets more complex, it is harder to do. And I don't think we always understand, I don't think we always measure as an industry the effects of advertising as accurately as you could. And I sometimes think a lot of the effects aren't always widely understood. So a couple of examples of the initiatives we've worked on over the last few years has been a product we've launched called Auction Boost, which is just very simply proving the effect that television has on your paid search, and it's a very positive impact. Or something like Pricing Power, where we're proving the effect of brand advertising on price elasticity or margin. You know, McCain's, I think, is a great example. You know, the Grand Prix winner at the IPA Effectiveness Awards that demonstrated, you know, over many years their ability to increase their margin. I think what we're trying to do is, for brands that don't have the luxury of econometric modelling, try and bring that to as many different advertisers as possible. So I think outcomes is the key to unlocking growth, because I think effectiveness is where we have a right to win in television.
I think it's a fantastic point, and I think we always talk about the IPA Effectiveness Awards, but and they are amazing, but that's 35 or 40 cases every 2 years. It needs to day-to-day proof, I think, of the power of what we do. Moving on and thinking about the complexities of that plate spinning operation that you're doing at Nationwide. Just talk to us a little bit about how the job of the CMO in the last few years has changed. We're not going to go back 25 years, but I'm just thinking of the last, say, 5 years or so. That complexity of that role, how does that affect you when you're thinking about building the Nationwide brand?
Well, I think what has changed for us in the way we're thinking about building our brand, I think there's sort of an element of revolution in the way that owned marketing is working, with the implementation of machine learning in terms of the way that we're doing decisioning and targeting, and obviously the addition of real-time data to drive personalisation. But it's hard, it's just evolution, right? So it's taking all the things that we've just been talking about and saying, so brand advertising is evolving, but it's not revolutionary. So creative excellence still matters. Buying optimization is absolutely key. Broadcast AV remains a critical tool to drive growth. And so the fundamental ingredients for driving success and growth, coupled with obviously high quality content, remains the same. What has changed, though, is the fragmentation of media and demographic behaviours requiring, so just what you were talking about here, which is a fundamental shift in the way that we approach planning, effectiveness, and outcome measurement, right? So, and we have to think about that differently. It becomes so complicated. And I think, an initiative that we would applaud, because of the way that the most difficult thing is effective reach and frequency cross-channel, that obviously the ISBA Origin initiative is a great way forward in terms of just helping clients understand how to do that. And secondly, I think this fight for attention has never been fiercer in terms of trying to cut through, to be noticed. And I spoke at the IPA Effectiveness Awards recently about this fundamental shift that we're seeing from aerial bombardment, aerial warfare, to street fighting, to the hand-to-hand marketing that we need to do, which does require different approaches. So we can no longer rely on the single big TV brand campaign that we maximise and optimise across the course of the year, but we need to have different approaches, and we need to have many more initiatives across many more channels and take many more bets. So for us, for example, we did this thing with a chicken burger shop, and we took it over. We rebranded it Nation Fried, and we used social media influencers, Harry Pinero and GK Barry, to help really create engagement with students, and we got a 30% market share in student activity by that one initiative. So stuff like that, together with what is really disruptive, cut-through creative that we've done through the Dominic West campaign, but also the way we've planned it by line live event media on TV. There's different ways that we need to approach a very complex, fragmented media that requires different skill sets, but it's just a different approach in planning, effectiveness, and outcome measurement.
I love that. I mean, what I loved about the campaign, the Dominic West campaign, it was a big campaign.
Yes.
But in a sense, just relying on a big campaign, and I think coming to you, Kelly, I mean, that was the thing that everybody saw that changed about Nationwide. And Catherine talked very warmly about the power of broadcast AV.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that that's getting the recognition it needs, it should have?
Yeah, look, I think scale I think is still really, really important, but I think it's scale alongside all of the other positives of television advertising. And what I mean by that is, trust, high attention metrics, emotionally engaging, long and short-term returns. The multiplier effect, I think this is really important. The fact that when you're on TV, it raises all of the other media that an advertiser is buying. But I think the other key one for me is brand safety. We talk about it a lot, but I think particularly, the journalists who were on the stage a second ago were talking about, a trusted environment. I think brand safety, particularly with what's recently gone on at Meta, I think is really, really important going forward. So I think a combination of scale and all of those other attributes, I think leaves, TV continues to be, in a very strong position.
Yeah. And I think actually on the issue of trust, we know that the ASA campaign, which we're not going to be talking about a huge amount today, but being led, multimedia, but led by broadcasting, has had a really powerful effect on public trust in advertising. Talking about the other part of the conversation that Catherine's got to manage, thinking about e-commerce and all the channels that you're now managing on behalf of your clients in terms of the complementary things that are multiplied by broadcast advertising. Laura, just give us a sense of how much of your effort at OMG is on e-commerce, on all of those direct-to-consumer type channels.
I mean, there's a lot. So I think, it was this time last year we acquired, as Omnicom, we acquired Flywheel, which is a huge digital commerce business, incredibly deep specialist in Amazon. I guess that's a good example of when you just chuck another one of those plates up into the air and it's another one to spin around. But it's actually really fascinating because each time we bring in new capabilities to our business in order to help our clients grow, the job for us as agencies is to try and make sense of that fragmentation, is to make sense of that complexity, to take what is vast amounts of data, whether that's audience identity data, whether that's kind of retail commerce data, media data, and our job is to aggregate and integrate that and help our planners, our buyers make better decisions that are orientated towards those commercial goals that you talked about. So I think when I think specifically about retail media, we know retail media will be the largest growing channel in the UK this year. We're forecasting about 14% growth of retail media. By that we mean advertising bought on site, but also advertising that is bought off site, but using that retail data to target and serve it. So it's quite a broad category. And it's fascinating. If we're thinking about our ambition is to be, full funnel around audiences, taking them all the way from kind of those really important jobs to change behaviours, change perceptions of brands, all the way through to that final point of purchase and beyond. It's a really, really important part of the jigsaw puzzle. We're doing a lot of work at the moment about how do we really integrate that, and we're starting to see some really incredible results actually when you bring that purchase data into your decision making from the brand advertising down, actually how it can help drive really really incredible value back to clients. So it's an exciting part of what we're doing, definitely.
And actually, we talk a lot about fragmentation, the explosion. Let's look at the flip side of that, and think about the positives of that, and perhaps. We've got a huge amount of channels now, retail being the most recently fast-growing one. Just give us a sense, Catherine, of is that a help or a hindrance to you in terms of your business?
It's such a good question because there's no question that it's become, superbly complex. And, gone are the days when we just had a scaled brand being able to have 4 channels with near universal reach, and you're never going to replicate that. That said, what you can do now is better target more precisely around demographics and attitudes. What you can do as good advertisers is you can create a clear blue water between yourselves and less sophisticated by being better at where you put it, how you do reach and how you do that targeting. And I'm genuinely excited. I think there's great potential to create real differentiation for the best versus the worst. One thing I do think is interesting is clearly the explosion of subscription VOD has obviously diminished the proportion of attentive viewing time that advertisers can reach. And I think it's encouraging that we're starting to see that partially unwind now, with streamers now opening up some of their inventory to which is great for us in terms of high quality content that we're able to match our brands against. So that is starting to be a bit of a back to the future, really, in terms of there is an ability to do reach, which is ultimately what we want to do at a broadcast level. We're just going to have to plan that across multiple different platforms. But in short, it's encouraging, Stephen.
Good.
I am optimistic.
That's great to hear. I love that optimism. Kelly, I want to bring you in because television has got immensely more complex and more, it's gone from, a fairly simple buy to being all sorts of different ways of reaching audiences. Just give us your view on that question.
I just building on what Catherine was saying, I think the most extraordinary stat in the AdPays report is the fact that there are 3.5 million advertisers last year. I did a quick check back at the ranch to see how many advertisers we dealt with last year, and it was about 8,500. Okay, right. So the long tail that everyone talks about is bloody long. It's gigantic. But I think it's a big opportunity for television, and we use this an acronym because I know advertising loves an acronym. So I'm going to try it out with you all. We use this word felt brands, which stands for fat end of the long tail, because we think that's our opportunity. It's finding those brands that have probably been built on social media and paid search, but are ready to scale. And we're spending a lot of our time as a television industry focusing on that cohort at the fat end of the long tail and bringing tons and tons of new advertisers on television. So I think that is a great opportunity for television going forward.
Well, I love that. So, I think we've all heard felt for the first time. First time I've heard it there. So, fat end of the long tail. We'll see if we get into Chris Bryant's speech next year. But I think it's a really interesting thing about growing the market and growing the reach of advertising. And that's one of the things, obviously, that the explosion of media has allowed. It's opened up access to advertising to way, way more businesses. But Laura, just offer your perspective again as a big agency. Are you into the fat end of the long tail at Omnicom Media Group?
Yeah, we deal with a lot of very large-scale brands, but I think the interesting thing is, as the landscape gets more complex and it slices up into lots of different pieces of the pie, it does make it more accessible. It does mean that you can pick and choose, and I think a lot of what we're doing now which is why I love what we do, and I always feel like we have this incredible privilege in agencies to get to kind of orchestrate and weave different solutions, talent, capabilities around the need of that specific client. And our ability to do that for those scale-up brands now is really key. And, and again, it goes back to understanding for those scale-up brands what they need to drive growth looks very different from what it might look like for a McDonald's, who are obviously a huge scaled advertiser. But it's about how we integrate those capabilities around those specific needs. Like for a scale-up, it might be that the best possible thing that you can do to help them drive growth is organise, sort out their SEO, and make sure they've got a really well-targeted brand advert.
What I do like is the thought that actually Nationwide, a very well-established, very venerable brand, acting like a challenger with your Nationwide. So I think, in a sense, everybody plays large and small.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in a world where there are so many advertisers and so many different ways, so many places to advertise, it's more important than ever that the creative's right, because to stand out and be impactful today is much, much harder. And I think that the consistency of creativity is really important. System One talk about the kind of compound effect of creativity. And look, Catherine did it brilliantly at Lloyd's for many years and started it at Nationwide. But that for me is something that's really important. Getting that creative right so that it has that impact and says that. Because look, advertising ultimately is a competition for memory. And memory is attached to emotion, and so building that emotional creativity is, I think, fundamental.
Absolutely fundamental. And I think the more we focus on technology and data and AI and the rest of it, the more actually that creativity comes to the fore, because those things without creativity are never going to reach their potential.
But I also think the more creativity will become a point of real competitive advantage when you get it right, because the more we get into synthetic audiences, synthetic data sets, if everyone's just using the same thing, they'll get to pretty homogenised answers. So therefore, the people who have the bravery to continue to step out. I mean, I wouldn't have believed that an AI will come up with Nationwide, that you've got, that is human ingenuity, which will always be the way that you get to that standout level of effective creativity.
Absolutely. I want to finish. We've got 1 minute left, and I just wanted to pick up on something that Chris Bryant mentioned, and I think he summed it up very well about LHF. If anybody, another acronym, probably a lot of people in the room know about LHF, less healthy foods. There's a piece of regulation going through at the moment in terms of applying the law. It was on the Today programme this morning. Whenever obesity is talked about, the forthcoming bans, the 9 p.m. watershed and the online ban on less healthy foods advertising is mentioned. Kelly, just the last 30 seconds from you about the impact, if you like, of that. I suppose we don't quite know where it's going to land at this point.
Yeah, end on a high, yeah.
End on a high.
Well, look, it's no secret that we have been violently opposed to the HFSS regulation, and I think for good reason. We've seen, children's viewing of television has dropped significantly over the last 10 years, significantly, and childhood obesity has had no effect on childhood obesity. However, we've lost that argument. The regulation is here. The effect on our business is really difficult to, really difficult to quantify because we don't know yet how advertisers are going to react, whether it's going to drive reformulation, whether it's going to mean that they switch copy to more healthy variants. But look, it's fair to say that it's not helpful to support our programming budget and help us compete. I think the challenge, and look, I felt it was quite optimistic what Chris said there. That the challenge has been is this interpretation of the legislation, and I think it's important the government follows through on what was their original intention behind it with regards to brand advertising. That's the bit that we're all spending all our time speaking to government at the moment because that's not clear. And I think it's reasonable to expect as an industry that we can get some clarity given this regulation starts on the 1st of October. So it's been frustrating, and we're spending a huge amount of time with government, but trying to just make sure that there's clarity around the guidelines so that advertisers and media owners know how to comply to the law.
Yeah, and I think we heard that from Chris, is that they want proportionate and realistic and common sense outcomes.
That felt positive.
And we know that they're working very hard, and obviously the ASA working very hard, and the industry working very hard to find that.
Yeah.
We're out of time. Thank you very much. That was a fantastic panel. So please say thanks to our panel here. Thank you.